In the last section, we set up our Firebase account and we enabled email and password for authentication. That's only half the setup though, as we still have to set up the Firebase client library so we can interact with their servers. So we still have to do a little bit setup now. But don't worry, this setup part isn't too bad. It's just more installation of modules. So first thing we're going to do is install the Firebase library as an NPM module. So I'm going to open up my command line. I'm inside of my project directory of auth right now. And I will npm install --save Firebase. So again, this is going to reach out to the npm registry and install Firebase as a dependency. After that, we will be able to set up Firebase inside of our application. Now, when we created our Firebase project, like over in the Firebase console here, when we made this authentication thing, it created a distinct bucket of data for our project that sits on the Firebase servers. So now, in theory, on the Firebase servers, there's some like big folder or bucket where all of our data is going to sit. So to set up our Firebase library locally, we have to tell it exactly what bucket to go reach out and try to get access to on the Firebase servers. Okay, so my Firebase library is done installing, and we are now going to tell it, hey, when you boot up, please try to connect to this very specific bucket of data. That's the goal here. So inside of our app component, we're going to place that initialization code inside of here. We will first import Firebase from Firebase. So this gives us access to the Firebase library. And then we are going to set up some initialization or configuration for it. And we need to think for a second, when's the best time to do setup like that? You know, when's the best time in our application to do that setup? And so I'm going to say, well, maybe the best time to do that setup would be right before this component right here, this app component, gets rendered to the screen of our device. To get a handle or a hook on that, we can use a lifecycle method. So we'll add the lifecycle method, component will mount, and inside of here is where we will do our Firebase initialization. Remember that lifecycle methods are methods that are automatically invoked inside of our component. All we have to do is define the method, and if we define it, it will be automatically called. All right, so last step, we are going to go back over to Firebase. And on the right-hand top side here, you can find a button that says Web Setup. I'm going to click Web Setup, and this gives me a bunch of stuff to copy paste into my application. Note that this is all set up assuming that you're using a web, or like you're in a web environment. So it's got some script tags and all that kind of good stuff. And we're clearly not in a web environment. We're using React Native. So we're going to kind of just copy paste a section out of this. I'm going to grab just this configuration object right here. So just everything from the opening curly brace to the closing curly brace. And then I'm going to copy it. And we'll pull it back over to our component will mount. And inside of here, we'll call Firebase initialize app. And I'm going to paste in that configuration. And I'm also going to make sure I delete the dangling semicolon here. Okay, and the last thing is ESLint really wants to have single quotes, and I am happy to oblige. So I'm just going to replace all these with single quotes like so. Okay, one of the last things, I put that import statement as the last statement. It should really be above any import statements for stuff that we write. That was a mistake on my side, so I'm just going to cut this line and move it above the header import. There we go, much better. Okay, so that's it. That's all we had to do for our Firebase setup. So at this point in time, we have installed the Firebase library, and we gave it a little bit of configuration that told it, hey, we've already got a project set up for you. There's some bucket of data on the Firebase servers that you need to make access to, and this is the configuration that makes that happen. So I think that we are just about all set now to start working on our form. Let's continue on the next section and start working on that sign up form.